Oh, it's just not.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good
Uh,
morning.
we have people that are with us online. Two of our members, Chairman Hawkins and Chairman Stevens. So I appreciate the ones of us that decided to drive to Atlanta and for this meeting. So thank you very much. We're going to have a sign up sheet is out front.
Yes.
So why don't we take a few minutes? If you haven't signed up and you want to speak, it's on the front desk. Is everybody signed up that wants to speak? Well, pardon?
If they're not on the agenda.
If you're not on the agenda, you don't have to sign up if you're on the agenda. So, well, and I appreciate everybody coming on a very, I went to this morning. It's actually a little bit cool, but I hope it's, the hot weather is getting to me. And I can't imagine, for some reason, to me, it seems like if you were a smoker, it would make you hotter. I don't know. That's, it just seems that way. So, I don't know whether I was just telling, some of the members about the fact that the Marietta School District, which is a wonderful school district in Cobb County, with a very innovative school superintendent, have now gone to and approved the money that they have so many kids vaping in the school that they're going to put vape detectors that give off the chemical from it in the bathrooms and other places. And they're not only going to do it in the high school, but they're going to have to do it in the junior high. It's a smaller school system, so there's one major high school and then one big junior high school. And I mean,
it's good and sad.
well, and then I thought it must be on timing because there was just an article from out in California, and I don't know what they are. They sort of showed a round box where if people are trying to get off smoking, but they want the nicotine, which is, I understand, one of the things that really is harmful, that children are getting them, little ones, and that just a small amount of it can kill a young child. And they're having more and more admissions. So they were trying to tell parents to be responsible. Michelle, we heard that somewhere about putting things up that are dangerous for kids to. Right. So that they need to realize that, when a young child gets that and they are flavored, so they, are drawn to those, that they can kill them. And I think they've had one or two deaths already. So with that, let's just get to the topic that we're having today. And I'm just going to go down the list I have. Dr. Fain with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. She here?
She's on Zoom.
Hi there. I am attending virtually via Zoom. Can you all hear me?
We'll turn up.
Okay. I apologize. I couldn't be there in person. I have clinic immediately following this. So I was happy, though, that I could still have the opportunity to speak to you all and see you all virtually. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share. I have some slides for you guys to look at while I'm talking.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time.
Of course. Okay, so can you all see my screen okay? It looks like slides. Great. Hey everyone, my name is Mary Ellen Fain. Thank you so much for having me today. I am a pediatric pulmonology fellow at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta via Emory. And, as someone who is a Georgia native, who has done all of their medical training in Georgia, and who is now a physician dedicated to caring for Georgia's children with lung diseases, this is a really exciting an opportunity that I'm really honored to get to speak to you all today about this very important topic, which is vaping and its effects on child health. And oops, sorry. I have no disclosures to discuss that are relevant to this presentation. And I wanted to start off speaking to you all today with a presentation of a patient who we cared for right here at Children's. This was a teenager, a 19-year-old, who presented back in October of 2019. At that time, they were complaining of 2 to 3 weeks of cough and painful breathing with exertion. This was completely new for them. They were a previously healthy patient, didn't have any history of lung issues or breathing problems. On their exam, they had very abnormal lung sounds and were found to have low oxygen levels. And on chest imaging, this is a CT scan of the chest. I think you are able to see my pointer. Just for reference, this is the heart, and this is kind of like a cross-sectional view of the lungs. And for reference, this is what normal is supposed to look like, nice and dark within both of the lungs. So this was very abnormal. This patient did have to be admitted to the hospital where they stayed for 6 days. During that time, they had multiple tests to look for causes of infection, or when infection was not found to be present, inflammation. Most of these were fairly normal, and they required supplemental oxygen, IV antibiotics while we were waiting for testing to come back, and then ultimately steroids to help with the inflammation. And as we were trying to figure out what could have caused this, previously healthy 19-year-old to come in so sick, a very key part of the history was that they admitted to using THC vaping products. And ultimately, they were diagnosed with e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury, or EVALI. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation, but at the time, this was a new diagnosis, so this case was pretty complicated and difficult to diagnose, but it also stuck out to me because it was, in my medical training, one of the first times I had seen a child come in very sick from vaping, and unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last time. So since I was the first speaker on the agenda today, I wanted to include a little bit of background about just what vaping is. Typically, we're talking about e-cigarette use, also known as electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS. But really, it's any use of any device that can heat a liquid from, for example, a cartridge, to create a chemical-filled vapor that can then be inhaled. Usually, the chemical of interest is nicotine or sometimes THC, but they can include other substances. So who is using these products? Unfortunately for us, in large part, the answer is our children. So today, youth use e-cigarettes or other vape devices more than any other tobacco product. After they were first introduced to the US market in 2007, we saw traditional cigarette use in youth decline from 2011 to 2020, and then e-cigarette use rising with a very sharp spike from 2017 to 2019. Of note, there was, some decline in report, at least, during the COVID pandemic, but since then, use has continued to become on the rise again. And certainly anecdotally, I can say that we definitely continue to see this in our patients. Currently, it's estimated that about 1 in 5 high school students have at least tried vaping. Some estimates are even higher. And about 6% of middle and high school students currently use e-cigarettes or other vape devices. Over 400,000 of these are middle school students, rather, which is very disturbing to me and hopefully to all of us. But who can blame them when so many of these products have, various flavors, colors, and marketing that are clearly appealing to children? And some of you may have seen this picture before. I know that when I was first shown this picture and asked to find the 2 vapes in the picture, I was stumped, I was fooled, and I was very surprised to see these that looked, exactly like highlighters. So not only appealing to children, but perhaps actively helping them and being able to vape in places like school or where it wouldn't otherwise be allowed. Now, aside from advertisements and kind of the appeal, as well as social pressures that we know can kind of influence kids into various risky behaviors, why else is vaping in particular so common? Well, one reason is the misconception that it may be safer than cigarettes. This is when you ask children and people in general who vape why they do it, one of the reasons that they commonly cite. And while generally speaking, there may be fewer chemicals than in traditional cigarettes, This does not mean that e-cigarettes or other vape devices are safe. We found a number of dangerous chemicals. Recently, the two main chemicals, propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, UNC found to be toxic to cells even in small doses. And the more different ingredients that were present in the vape device, the greater the toxicity. There are numerous other dangerous chemicals, be it in the liquid itself or created from the process of heating up the liquid. So aldehydes, which are known to cause cancer, substances that are used in herbicides that we know can cause serious lung disease. And then the flavorings in particular have also been linked to serious lung disease. And that's something that can be a bit more unique even to these products. And then nicotine, as we've already touched on itself, is known to be harmful, particularly to children. And it is present when they test them in almost all vaping devices. Even those that claim on the label to be nicotine-free can still be found in some amount. And not only that, but typical nicotine vaping devices can contain anywhere from 2 to 10 times more nicotine than an average cigarette. So one pod, for example, is about equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. So the amount of nicotine that can be consumed in a given amount of time can actually be much higher with vape devices. Now, what about as an alternative or as like a quitting mechanism to smoking? You know, we know that it's not ideal, but is it better at least? And really, the FDA has not found any e-cigarette to be either safe or effective in helping people who use tobacco products quit. What happens for many people is they end up with dual use or using both traditional cigarettes and e-cigarette or vaping devices, which is not helpful. And aside from that, vaping itself independently is associated with risk for future tobacco and cannabis use. This is within, children or people who aren't even exposed, for example, in the household to traditional cigarettes at baseline. So vaping can be perhaps even more of a gateway to cigarette use rather than like a quitting or, deterrent to cigarette use. And sadly, these dangers don't just affect those who actively vape. We talked last month, I know, a bit about secondhand tobacco exposure, and the research is showing that similar concerns hold true for vaping as well. When kind of analyzed, the secondhand e-cigarette emissions have been found to contain, again, this long list of harmful chemicals, heavy metals, things found in car exhaust. Again, the flavoring can be found in the secondhand emissions as well, which, as we mentioned, can be linked to serious lung disease. And so really, secondhand e-cigarette exposure is also not safe. And in one study, they found similar letters of cotinine, which is a level that we can test and is thought to be a measure of secondhand nicotine exposure. They found them to be similar in those exposed to secondhand e-cigarette vapor as compared to traditional cigarette tobacco smoke. And so when we think about the impact that vaping has on children and people in general, we think that we can extrapolate, we're pretty sure that we can extrapolate a lot of what we know from traditional cigarette use. Because, vaping e-cigarettes are a bit newer, we don't have as many long-term studies on the effects of vaping. But with the overlap in a lot of the chemicals present and with the research that we have done, we feel that a lot of this is likely applicable, even if we haven't had enough time to do studies in the same way that we have for traditional cigarette smoking. So to review some of those health impacts, they include things like various respiratory illnesses and pneumonias, worsening asthma, as well as the risk of developing asthma when you're exposed. Lots of behavioral problems like ADHD, antisocial behavior, middle ear infections that can cause hearing impairment. Sudden infant death syndrome is a big one. And the risk is double for children who are exposed to secondhand smoke. And then children of smoking parents may also have learning difficulties, slower growth. And then again, as we've touched on, nicotine itself can be problematic. It's highly addictive children and adolescents are more susceptible to becoming addicted due to their developing brains. And then nicotine in turn affects brain development, things like learning, memory, attention. So really no level of nicotine exposure for children in particular is safe. And so with vaping specifically, we have had multiple studies now to show that vaping itself is associated with some pretty undesirable health outcomes. So things like lung disease, we know vaping can cause chronic cough, bronchitis, decreased exercise tolerance, higher risk of pneumothorax or collapsed lung due to kind of a rupture of one of the areas of the lung, and then some chronic lung diseases that can be very detrimental and difficult to treat, such as bronchiolitis obliterans and lipoid pneumonia. Vaping has also been shown to be related to impaired immunity, such that e-cigarettes make it harder for the cells in the lungs in particular to fight off viruses and clear bacteria. While vaping itself, we haven't had enough long-term studies to correlate to cancer. We know, again, that the specific chemicals within the vape emissions or the vape itself are linked to an increased risk of cancer. And then studies have also been emerging more in the adult population, but still pertinent for the long term, as vaping emerging as a risk factor for poor cardiovascular health as well. Additionally, you can have nicotine toxicity when you ingest high amounts of nicotine, which is easier to do with these vaping products, as I mentioned, which can cause a whole slew of symptoms. And then we also touched a bit at the beginning on accidental ingestions or injuries. And so there have been several studies or reports, I should say, of children, mostly under 5 years old, accidentally ingesting the e-liquids from vapes. And you can have similar symptoms to the ones I just mentioned or showed above. However, in young children, because their body size is smaller, even with lower doses of nicotine, this nicotine toxicity is more likely to lead to death. And there have been reports of young children dying from accidentally ingesting nicotine, the e-liquids from the e-cigarettes that were intended for somebody else in the household. These e-cigarettes also with the batteries can cause severe burns to the face and head, can cause eye injuries or eye loss when the device malfunctions. That's also been reported several times. There are also mental health outcomes, such as depression, increased risk of suicidality and anxiety. Some of these risks are just similar as other forms of nicotine or THC, but again, the higher concentrations found in vaping products may amplify these risks. And then when mixed with other substances, such as alcohol or other drugs, which can be common, you have increased risk for even more serious mental health disorders, such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And then, when you get to the point where you're trying to quit, withdrawal from nicotine can also be extremely unpleasant and make it very, very hard to quit. And this is notable because research has shown that most middle and high school students report wanting to quit, but this is one thing that makes it very difficult. And then another complication, which I wanted to go in a little bit more depth on, given our case presentation, was EVALI. This was first described in the summer of 2019, and it's where the inhaled chemical from vape aerosols can cause a really severe immune response, causing inflammation in the lung. Traditionally, we thought it was the vitamin E acetate component in the vaping liquid that primarily was contributing to EVALI, though more recently in particular, it seems like other chemicals are also implicated. And again, traditionally, we thought of it as more common in THC-containing products or products on the black market, though we are now finding that it has occurred after using nicotine-only containing products as well. And symptoms can include cough, chest pain, and I'm getting a little bit of an echo, I'm sorry. And then shortness of breath, and then the impact on the lung can be severe enough such that you see low oxygen levels and can lead to hospitalization or even death. Less common in children, but has been reported. And then this is a condition that's very difficult to treat because we don't really have diagnostic tests for it or, a proven treatment regimen. So when we see it, it can be very difficult. And in between August 2019 to March 2020, there were just under 3,000 cases reported in the US and Canada, and about 15% of those were children under age 18, and the median age was 24 years. So this is definitely something that is not just for adults, but we were seeing in children. And while, since the COVID 2020 pandemic, this data isn't routinely being collected any longer, again, I can say that we've definitely continued to see this in our pediatric population occasionally. And then vaping, of course, as a pediatric pulmonologist, some of the patients who I take care of, I feel, very strongly that them avoiding vaping or exposure, even secondhand to vaping, is very important. So one example is with cystic fibrosis or CF. This is a lung disease where one of the main salt channels in the cells that are very predominant in the lungs don't work properly. And one of our group in a study that they did recently actually found that exposure to e-cigarette vapors further decreases that function, that channel function or cell function. And of note, this was worse with the flavored products. So again, more evidence that the flavor in particular can be quite harmful. And the decrease in the function actually negated the effectiveness of some of our very important and impressive CF treatments that in children who don't vape or who aren't exposed to e-cigarette vapors, we've seen a lot of improvement in their cystic fibrosis. And so the fact that it could negate those really impressive benefits from the medication is pretty concerning. And then also asthma is another big one. So asthma is very prevalent in Georgia, especially compared to other states. And we know that youth who are exposed to e-cigarettes are at increased risk for developing coughing and wheezing, similar to asthma. And also those who have asthma have a higher risk for an increased number of asthma exacerbations. And then lastly, children with asthma also contributed disproportionately to the EVALI presentations. And so certainly are at risk for more significant disease as it relates to vaping. So as some closing thoughts, more research is needed with vaping, but even with what we have so far, there are clear negative health impacts, particularly on children. We should consider both primary use of vapes and secondhand exposure risky, and certainly not as a favorable alternative to cigarette use. It's very difficult to quit even when the desire is there, so best practice is to prevent use and exposure in the first place. And so education to parents and children is extremely important, and that's something that we as physicians can be very active in. But anything that we can do to prevent acquisition, exposure, and use of vaping products is in the interest of Georgia's children. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. It was very informative and especially not encouraging about what's happening. It seems like, the vaping was supposed to be the great solution to helping people get off cigarettes and decreasing the amount of tobacco. And it looks like it's actually causing more problems than at times than the smoking does. Representative Al, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. To piggyback on your point, Chair Cooper, I think you make a great point with respect to how vaping is presented and marketed by the companies, the purveyors of vapes, is that they do often present it as a safer alternative or as a cessation tool for people who are addicted to cigarettes. However, I think that motivation is belied by the fact that they do so avidly market it to children who are much less likely to be needing to quit cigarettes, right? So I think that there's a way you present it to make it palatable or, to hide some of these health effects that is not borne out in how they're actually seeking to grow their customer base. One thing I want to underline also, because I know it's of importance to this body, is in specific, the health effects, the neuropsychiatric health effects of vaping, right? You did a great job outlining all the direct organ damage to the lung and the heart in particular. But I want to reemphasize that there are significant neuropsychiatric sequelae of exposing a developing brain to high and often unregulated nicotine content, right? Can you talk just a little bit? I know you're a pediatric pulmonologist, so you're not a psychiatrist, but in terms of what you see concomitantly with some of the lung damage, in terms of the difficulty in quitting and some of the difficulties in learning, mood regulation, addiction, resulting from vaping exposure.
Yes, absolutely. So that is, again, something I less directly deal with, but have certainly seen, concomitant with a lot of our patients who have vaping or, again, nicotine in general use. And the impact on the developing brain, it can be mild, relatively mild initially, like irritability, hyperactivity. But as the use goes on, there certainly seems to be a correlation to those children having not just mood disorders, or more likely to have mood disorders, as I mentioned, such as anxiety or depression, but also some behavioral disorders, like I mentioned, like ADHD, kind of antisocial behaviors, kind of rolling into other social concerns, such as school absences, be it via truancy or from the health effects, the negative health effects from the vaping itself. So there's certainly a number of downstream psychiatric, mood, behavioral, and social educational impacts from the vaping use or nicotine use. In terms of quitting, from our patients, I will say my personal experience, I've been, I don't want to say lucky, but when we see those who come in with very significant lung disease, such as EVALI, I think that has been enough to scare most of my personal patients away from using vaping, but we don't want to have to get to that point for them to not vape or be deterred from vaping. So certainly other programs, school-based programs, and more education on the front end from both our standpoint and the general pediatrician standpoint have been shown to be beneficial in making sure kids and families know that this isn't something that's safe really at any level, especially for children. And then in terms of quitting, there are social kind of support programs out there, and then some more recent studies on, non-nicotine containing drugs that can also be beneficial if the addiction is, very embedded and they're having a lot of withdrawal symptoms. So we definitely have options out there, but again, they're not easy. And so preventing use in the first place is really paramount.
Okay, you have a question?
I do. This is,
Buckner.
excuse me. This just seems to be from personal observation, but it seems like people who vape do it more frequently than people who smoke. And I didn't know if that might be because of the increase in the nicotine in the products and that they need it more frequently. But I also wondered, by having the Clean Indoor Air Act not necessarily address vaping indoors in public places, if that gives them more opportunity as well. Can you just talk about that? Because that's where policy meets the road. Do we need to do some things to address that?
Yes, absolutely. So, having the ability to be able to use tobacco products, as we've already seen with cigarettes, versus not having the ability, we know can reduce use. And so certainly being allowed, or, not having somebody who's going to, remove them from an establishment is certainly, by not presenting that barrier, it can certainly make it more likely to vape and easier to vape. And I think to your point about, vaping more frequently than using a cigarette, I think part of that is both due to the spaces that it's allowed in, and then also just the ease of use of the product itself, being able just to use the vape, press a button, not have to go outside, light a cigarette, makes it easier to use. And then with the higher concentrations, it's also more addictive. So I think it's kind of a vicious cycle of it's easy to use, so you use it, you get higher nicotine doses, so you want it more. It's easy to use, so you use it more. So anything that we can do to make use less easy and more difficult can certainly be helpful. And then also, again, in terms of the amount of nicotine and the kind of marketing of the nicotine and the products, adjusting that so that it's not something that's seen as a safe alternative can also certainly be beneficial.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you very much for taking your time, and we'll let you get up to your clinic. And we appreciate your work, and thank you for practicing in Georgia. So
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all so much for having me.
thank you. Okay. I will say, having been a pediatric nurse in my former life and teaching pediatric nursing at one point, I was on vacation in a lovely seaside resort having dinner and watched a father vape and then blow the smoke into the face of a 3-year-old and laugh about it. I think it was all they could do to keep me at the table. I was about to. No, but I wanted to. I was the guest of the people that were having the dinner, and I couldn't do it, but I sure wanted to. And I think this total belief that it's not harmful is a major problem because of the advertising. So I don't know how much control we have over that, but that's one of the reasons we're having this study committee. Okay. The next speaker is on the Atlanta Council, Mrs. Bakhtari. Did I get it? Oh, thank goodness. So,
Always say bacteria, so I appreciate you.
oh,
Thank you. My name is Liliana Bakhtiari. I'm on the Atlanta City Council. I appreciate y'all coming. May I close this or no? Okay. I appreciate you all allowing me to come speak today as a legislator. We just recently passed distance requirements on vape shops in Atlanta. Wanted to kind of speak to what the motivation of that was. So first and foremost, Chairperson Cooper, honorable members of the committee, and distinguished guests, I thank you again for the opportunity to address you all. We're living in a pivotal moment. Georgia has turned its focus to one of the most pressing public health crises of our generation, the youth vaping epidemic. To be clear, this isn't about flavored cartridges or devices disguised as USB drives. This is about the future of Georgia's youth, their health, their development, and their potential. Once again, we are witnessing an industry masking addiction as innovation, using flavor, technology, and stealth to prey on teens and children, and we cannot afford to look away. When you walk the halls of a Georgia high school today, a middle school or a junior high, you don't smell cigarette smoke. You see clouds of vapor and hear stories of kids vaping in classrooms, restrooms, as you said, Chairwoman, and even under their desks. Devices are disguised as pens, markers, phone cases, flash drives, and more, which tells us that nicotine companies are targeting kids specifically, encouraging them to engage in things like stealth vaping, which oftentimes means short, fast breaths and blowing into their clothes, their sleeves to hide it in classrooms and others. And you can imagine that also means faster intake of a lot of chemicals. You heard the doctor say that nearly 1 in 5 high school students in Georgia have tried vaping, and in some instances even more. And nearly 40% of those kids and young adults vape almost daily. We know that nicotine is one of the most addictive substances on the planet, and that addiction forms fastest during adolescence. Nearly 90% of adult smokers start before the age of 18. The longer and more frequently youth vape, the greater risk of asthma, bronchitis, anxiety, depression, and in severe cases, hospitalization, as you heard, from conditions like EVALI or bronchiolitis obliterans, also known as popcorn lung. Georgia is not alone in this, but we have the opportunity and the responsibility to lead, and I believe we can do that. To talk again about the impact being profound. Lung damage, as you heard, EVALI, popcorn lung, rare, but increasingly common, but cases on the rise, and are life-threatening illnesses that have been directly tied to vaping. Mental health, studies link with vaping with anxiety, depression, tension issues, particularly among teens. Heart and brain health, nicotine elevates blood pressure, damages brain development, and affecting impulse control and learning during critical formative years. Workforce disruption, vaping is threatening long-term workforce readiness by increasing the burden of addiction and chronic illness. An important thing to make note of. Educators across Georgia are reporting daily disruptions. Schools are now investing, as you heard the chairwoman say, in vape detectors, mental health counselors, and intervention programs, stretching already underfunded resources. And I should say, to make a note, something I didn't write down in my notes, but something I did want to inform you on is that many counties and states have actually started running these programs off of massive lawsuits that they've won with companies like Juul. And so they're having to utilize those lawsuits in order to better inform their youth and their students, which, as we know, is not a sustainable model. And local leadership, talking about how we step up. As I said, we passed a zoning ordinance to limit vape shops near schools, also to help limit vape shops from each other, because we know that they are monopolizing commercial corridors and storefronts. Marietta schools, again, implemented vape detection and counseling backed by broader community support. And many states have adopted bold, effective legislation to restrict youth access. Many have included at least 4, 5, 6 states now have strong policies, including banning flavored vape sales in gas stations and convenience stores, restricting online and mail order sales, zoning limits near schools, high vape taxes to discourage use, licensing requirements for specialized vape retailers. These laws are reducing youth exposure and access while empowering parents, schools, and communities. And as a legislator, something I really do want to focus on, something that you won't hear specifically from the medical field, is zoning and restrictions. So I really want to focus on gas stations. I also believe that's being left out of this conversation, and it is a really, really important piece because we are not including that in our overall vape shops. And they are primary access points for youth for vaping due to inconsistent age verification, high foot traffic, and point of sale advertising and flavored packaging. In other states like Massachusetts, Chicago, other places have required specialty retail licenses for vape sales, banning flavored vape sales again in general retail environments, enforcing substantial distance from schools, and increasing compliance checks and civil penalties. I have, if you wouldn't mind, policy recommendations for our state. Banning the sale of flavored vape products in convenience stores and gas stations, limiting vape sales to licensed adult-only retailers, prohibiting sales near schools, parks, and youth servicing spaces, funding public education campaigns on vaping risks, support school-based prevention and cessation efforts, create a statewide retailer licensing system with enforcement and transparency, increase taxation on vaping products to reduce youth use and fund health programs. So I will say this in closing, members of the committee, the limited data we do have has already been very clear. The harm is real. The time to act is now. And we are only seeing these effects because also nicotine companies have been so good at targeting youth and encouraging to hide these things from their parents and adults. So oftentimes we don't know how much vaping is taking place until it is too late. And I want to actually speak to a story of that case. I have a friend with a daughter who is a junior in high school who was working on getting a full competitive cheerleader who was working on getting a full ride to university. And as you know, junior years are critical for that type of, for those initiatives. Her mother gets a call. Her daughter's having trouble breathing. She rushes her to the hospital. The doctor tells her it's actually popcorn lung and that she can no longer compete. Her ability to partake in physical activities is now gone. We don't know how it'll worsen with age because the data isn't there. We just know that she has popcorn lung and that it is irreversible. Her chances for those scholarships are gone. Another friend, young father, vaped daily and aggressively around his children too. And now he says that even trying to hike at a moderate incline feels like he's breathing through a straw. And his doctors have told him he has the lung capacity of a 70-year-old smoker, and he is in his early 20s. Think about how that will impact his children and his ability to be a father and his ability to support his family through his jobs, because his field is in vocational training. He works with his hands. We are watching the next wave of addiction take hold in real time. The longer we delay, the more deeply rooted this crisis becomes in our schools, our healthcare systems, and our families. Let Georgia be the state that said we refuse to let another generation be sold into addiction. If we have the lever, the momentum is here. Let's seize the opportunity and make Georgia a leader in the fight to protect our children's health. Because, did someone say something? No, we're good. Because I am seeing, and we are seeing, nicotine companies treat this as a free-for-all to experiment their products on our children, on our youth, And they should not be allowed to falsely sell this as a safer alternative to smoking when it is more readily available in buildings and in classrooms and anywhere, because we see these items disguised as everyday products and we don't even know. And these are available on black markets as well that are increasingly unregulated when we already know what is on the market isn't fully regulated. So they're able to get a hold of products on from adults and from black market sites that are even further unregulated. Falsely advertising this is safe, tricking parents and children into believing this, encouraging kids to hide this from adults. These are all malicious intent. And I do trust and have faith in you all, and I'm grateful for this committee because it shows a willingness to take action against companies that are taking advantage of our kids. And I hope you all know that I believe that our state and our municipalities and counties really want to work together on this. And please know that I am a resource to this committee for anything that is needed to ensure that we are protecting our future generations, our state, our economy, our health. It is critically important. And I just want to thank you for your time, your leadership, and your commitment to this work. Thank you.
I have a question. Like all cities, the Atlanta Council doesn't always get along and everybody agree on everything. How much pushback did you get in trying to get this through, and how long did it take you to do it?
I actually didn't receive a great deal of pushback in Atlanta for something like this. I did not receive a great deal of pushback.
Okay.
What we had to do in our city charter, however, was define vape shops, define early childhood education, define these locations that were not previously defined in order to pass the legislation. But when we do those types of changes, it has to go through our neighborhood planning unit system so that each of the MPUs and the communities have a say. And the only feedback I got was, please, because before it was just schools and vape shops from each other. And the only thing I got in return for the only feedback I got from the community was, please include early childhood education facilities.
Thank you. I was curious if it was had much pushback, like the taking away the cell phones
Yes.
during the school day. Quite a
I'm
bit.
sure you'll receive pushback for the kids, but that's
Yeah,
part of our
so,
jobs.
okay.
And
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will say this is not a partisan issue, so we will absolutely get along just fine working
Okay.
together.
Representative Buckner just asked me if you were going to share your list of suggestions with us.
I am happy to create this as a PDF format to send to you all, including
Give it to Andrew.
to give it to you all, yes, and to include the sources cited in the footnotes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative, we have a question. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much, Councilperson Bakhtiari, for coming to testify. Thank you so much for your work on this. I honestly do think that the state is probably a little bit behind on this issue, and I can probably say I understand a little bit why, because when you think back to Dr. Fain's presentation and the case she put up with the CT scan, you'll notice that that patient came in October of 2019. And I think at that time, we do remember having these conversations about having these patients come in with severe respiratory illness. Popcorn lung was a thing we were talking about. And then another respiratory epidemic came in and, as it were, sucked out all the oxygen from the room, and we kind of lost momentum on this. So that's why I think we are a little bit behind in talking about it. I really appreciate us talking about it now. And I appreciate the Atlanta City Council for taking the initiative on this issue, particularly as it relates to youth uptake of vaping and ways to contain that. I echo that interest in having that policy recommendation sent to us so we can have it for our third committee meeting, which will be brainstorming on policy recommendations we can have resulting from the first two meetings. And I will note that particularly with the vaping tax, which has been shown to disincentivize youth smoking in particular, because young people are more sensitive to price increases, that we do have a piece of legislation that is active in the legislature right now, HB 84, which aims to raise Georgia's vaping tax, which is taxed by unit volume of vaping liquid, simply up to the national average. So I think that's a great start and something that's already in the works. So hopefully the city-state partnership can continue on this nonpartisan issue.
Well, like I said, I am here to be a resource in any way I can. I will get this to you all, but this is something I feel that we are all deeply impassioned about. And I understand the state being behind, but I think y'all should give yourself some credit. There was a worldwide pandemic. And I think that this and the willingness to do speaks volumes. And I'm just very appreciative. So I will get that sent to you all. And I thank you again for your time. And if there are no more questions, I will get out of your way and allow for the next speaker.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, and I think that one of the problems that we have is that we are legislators and we bring our life experiences to any decision that we make. We have a few smokers. I don't think near as many as there used to be. But the main thing is, I think a lot of the legislatures have bought the advertising that this is not something that is terribly threatening to children, that it is better than cigarettes. And, when you bring it up, they're sort of hesitant because that's what they tell you, that at least they're not smoking cigarettes anymore. So I think not only do we need to do a better ability to educate the public, but we also are going to have to work on educating our colleagues before we will have a whole lot of momentum behind passing bills. And that happens a lot because if you are a banker, you may not think of this if you're not in the health field. And we're going to need a lot of help with that because there are a whole bunch of us that need that re-education. So going on.
Chair
Ms.
Cooper, can you hear me?
Yes. Good. Hey.
I apologize. My computer here is not showing a hand raise, so I apologize about breaking in without
No problem.
doing the
Just
hand
stop.
raise.
Just stop.
Well, I just wanted to say, I missed the first meeting and I've been missing parts of this. I've had some problems with staying online, but I'm not sure if the committee's aware of House Bill, I think it's 557 by Houston Gaines, that deals with vaping. We heard it in regulated industries. It makes it illegal to sell certain vaping products in the state of Georgia. It applies the FDA rules that are in place and laws. Is 577, excuse me, House Bill 577, which we passed in the House. It's over on the Senate side just sitting. But it was very good legislation brought by Houston Gaines, and he had long discussions in regulated industries about the contents of the materials in vaping and the disclosure of those contents and the vaping products that are recognized by the FDA and those that are not. They found that those that were not recognized by the FDA were still being sold in the state of Georgia. So with this law, this legislation we have pending in the Senate, it will crack down on these vape shops, what they're selling, and the materials must be identified.
Chairman Hawkins, thank you very much for trying to be with us today, despite problems with your.
Yeah. Well,
but-
it's a new pad, so I'm having to teach it, or it's
Okay.
teaching me.
But I think though, if you'll pull House Bill 577, sounds like that would certainly be one way to start,
Yes,
to begin.
very good way to start. Yeah,
If it's already made it over to the Senate, then we just
Advocate.
we just have to advocate for it. But
there you
thank
go.
you for that
Thank you.
information, because
Yeah.
I mean, weird. I don't think people realize how many bills come before us. I think weren't there over 2,000 bills somewhere put in last year between the House and the Senate. We pass about 300 bills a year. A lot of those are just bills to bring us in compliance with federal changes, like what drugs are certain things. And so if you're not on a certain committee, even when it comes to the House and we're passing bills and you're looking at all of them, it can be something can slip by you. Were you aware
That's
of that?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make a comment. I could.
Okay.
Hey, Chairman Hawkins, nice to see you. I like your new pad. It looks cool.
Sure. Well, I sit on regulated industry, so that's the reason I would know about it.
I just want to make a comment about HB 577 and just to have us look at that piece of legislation in particular and take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. I recognize that everyone on this committee is very aligned on our goal to protect patients. So I simply present this other point, which is that obviously it is good to make sure that the products we sell are FDA regulated, and we want them to be as monitored as possible. However, one thing about HB 577 is that there is a industry interest buried within that bill. When that bill came to the floor in the House, I actually voted no on it. And a lot of people noticed that and asked me, why did you vote no on this bill? This seems good. This seems like something you would like, Michelle. And the reason is because sometimes with these bills that are wrapped in what sounds like altruistic intent to protect patients and to protect customers and users, can be a way to protect industry interests in terms of having a monopoly on who is purveying and selling these products. So when we have a bill that basically seeks to have a chokehold on where these vapes come from, it really narrows down that market to a certain number of manufacturers that have tobacco interests. So I just want us, when we look at this bill, to just take that into consideration. It's not my place to tell people how to vote on this, but certainly when it comes back from the Senate, to just keep that in mind. And that is why I voted no on it the first 2 times it was in front of us.
Representative Hawkins?
Oh, well, yeah, I think she makes a good
Good.
point. But at the same time, there was a lot of protections in that bill. And also, it does regulate who is selling in the state of Georgia. But within those regulations, those manufacturers must adhere to the guidelines of our state laws and federal laws. Right now, it's a wild, wild west with these products. They're coming in unregulated, not even identifying what's in them. They're being bought and sold from foreign countries and moved into the shops where our children are buying them. And so, although that is, Michelle does bring up a point there, I think the focus of this bill is very important. We need to have a very strong hand on these manufacturers and what's being sold to our children, and at the very least know what's in those products. So, we'll move forward with the bill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and thank you for making us aware of that. It's sort of like people say, well, that was a really great bill, like they say to you. And as all of us look at it, we may find reasons that, yes, a bill overall might be good, not particularly saying this one, but just all of them. But they may have unintended consequences down the road, and somebody may vote against them for that reason. Okay, Miss Rhodes. Wait a minute, did I skip somebody? Oh, Miss Bakur. And we're okay. Sorry, sir. You're a student at Georgia Tech?
Yes.
Okay, which means only take really brainy students at Georgia Tech. Now, you're one of the smart ones. So I'm glad to
Knock on wood.
Thank you for coming. What's your major?
I'm studying biomedical engineering.
Okay.
Yes. So I can go ahead and start. So
Yeah.
good morning, Chair Cooper and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Suhas Reddy Bonkur, and I'm a current 4th-year student at Georgia Tech, and I'm studying biomedical engineering from Cumming, Georgia. Outside of academics, I'm a swimmer, podcast founder, and proud Georgian who is deeply invested in the health and well-being of our communities. I'm also a proud member of Georgia's American Heart Association State Advocacy Committee. I am here to speak about an urgent crisis affecting Georgia's youth, the mass availability of tobacco and e-cigarette products. Despite decades of progress in reducing cigarette smoking, these products are finding new and creative alternatives and new ways to hook a generation that is supposed to be the healthiest and most active in history. So the issue we are facing is not just about individual choice. It's about how aggressively these products are being marketed towards children and teens, and how easy they are to access, and how devastating the long-term health and financial consequences can be. I'm deeply concerned with, even after establishing since the 1960s that cigarette smoking was bad, these products are finding new avenues and new ways to infiltrate the growing minds of our Georgia youth and Georgia youth communities. And so imagine this. Imagine you're a high school track athlete with college recruiters lining up to see you run. You only vape occasionally, maybe once after a big win or maybe after at a party, so you don't think it's a big deal. But one day you find yourself running a race and out of breath and unable to finish that race. and your dream slowly slips away. This was the reality for one of my friends from high school, where his entire future as an athlete was jeopardized and eventually taken away from him from what just started as just a few hits of Juul products. And he is not alone. Over 2 million high school and middle school students in 2023 used vaping and e-cigarette products. And alarmingly, 1 in 3 of those individuals die prematurely from it. And that's not just one statistic, that is a call to action. Thousands of young Georgians lose decades of healthy life when it should be the prime of their life. When I was in school, programs like Red Ribbon Week drilled into us the dangers of smoking, yet no comparable effort exists for e-cigarette products or vaping initiatives. So many of our youth have unfortunately bought into the lie that e-cigarettes are a safe alternative. And so why is this an urgent concern? E-cigarettes and vaping products pose a myriad of different biological, social, and financial impacts as well. So starting with biological, as mentioned by a lot of the speakers here today, nicotine exposure from an early onset age permanently affects brain damage. And as I said, these are the years when young people are just beginning their careers. They're learning about themselves, they're learning independence, they're forming relationships that are bound to blossom. And instead, addiction robs them of focus, energy, and emotional stability. In fact, according to the CDC, vaping is linked to increased anxiety, increased depression, and future tobacco use when it is designed to be a cessation method off of tobacco, which then creates a lifelong cycle of dependence on these very destructive products. In addition, there's a major social impact. So as a Georgia Tech peer educator and wellness coach, I've seen that in many of our adolescent communities, vaping often isolates teens from supportive friendships and family, and instead draws them into riskier social circles. Depression, declining academic performance, and strained family relationships often follow. And this deeply disheartens me, as this should be a time when teens and young adults should be discovering their passions, free from negativity and not having it interfered with. In addition, there's also a misconception that vaping is cheaper compared to tobacco and other products, but it's not cheap at all, and it can cost thousands of dollars every year to users. And so this creates a huge financial drain on young people when they're saving for college or they're saving for future use. And add to this the medical bills from respiratory issues and in some severe case, permanent lung damage. And boom, you have a cost to not only the families of these users, but also the state, who has to provide healthcare services to the individuals and then overburdens the healthcare facilities as well. And so what are some causes for this high prevalence of vaping and e-cigarette usage in teens? A major issue is the targeted marketing. So when I was back in high school in 2017, Juuls exploded in popularity because of deliberate marketing to teens. Companies spent millions advertising annually and getting social media influencers, bright packaging, and cool flavors like mango, creme brulee, cucumber. I mean, these, as teens, you think that these are really interesting flavors. I mean, they sound delectable, right? But teens aren't choosing these products, right? They're being targeted. And so I saw students smoking in parking lots, smoking in bathrooms, and even smoking in the classroom, underneath their hoods and just hiding the smoke underneath their coats. And most of them were able to get these products from an older sibling who was a college student, or from third-party vendors who sell them at a much, much higher rate to them. And in addition, a major cause for this disparity is that in Georgia, many vape shops are located very close to schools and colleges. And so it becomes almost part of their daily routine, right? It's super easy for them and very convenient to just take a hit. Maybe it's as simple as grabbing a snack after school. And this easy access normalizes its behavior and fuels the addiction. So after we discussed all those severe negative impacts and the causes for this disparity, what are some ways we can address it? Thankfully, we're not powerless. Georgia's tobacco use prevention program was recently eliminated due to federal cuts. This is a loss to prevention work that is instrumental and the state needs to invest in. We must reinstate and modernize these initiatives to address vaping specifically. Additionally, all flavored tobacco products, including menthols, should be immediately eliminated, and this policy should be enforced. We need to teach students that vaping is not a safe alternative. Just as smoking education in the 1990s helped drive cigarette usage to historic lows, we can use that same strategy to target campaigns against vaping to achieve the same success. In addition, I believe that many high school students get their first vape from older siblings like college students. So I believe that if we're able to specifically focus our initiatives within the college student population, we're not only able to discourage them from using these products, but we're also indirectly affecting many dependent populations like high school students and middle school students. So to reduce tobacco and vaping, the state should also raise the tobacco taxes, ensure that Medicaid is able to cover tobacco cessation initiatives, and support smoke-free policies and ordinances that prohibit indoor smoking and vaping in workplaces and public places. So to sum it all up, committee members, I'm here not to just share numbers. I'm here to share my story, and I'm here to share the reality of what Georgia's youth and teen face. Their potential should not be lost before even reaching adulthood, and they should not be succumbed to the power of vaping and e-cigarettes. And it's our responsibility to reinstate Georgia's youth tobacco prevention initiatives to limit the access these products have on our Georgia youth. Thank you.
Right? Thank you very much. Do we have questions? Just a big thank you for doing that. How did you get involved with the Heart Association?
Yeah, so a lot of the stories came from high school. And so that's really where I got started thinking about just how prevalent and how detrimental these effects are. And so I was able to reach out, just cold email to some of the grassroots managers as part of the American Heart Association. And from then, I've been doing panel discussions, working with other grassroots initiatives. And, this is still really early in my career. So I do want to grow and continuously learn to make a greater impact on these communities.
Okay. And does the association have any studies on how effective the cessation programs are? They can tell me if somebody's. Okay. Because I think not necessarily your programs, I'm not saying that, but I think there may be a feeling that so many of the programs that have been approved and are not being effective, and that, I mean, I'm not on the national level, thank goodness. But it seems to be a generalized feelings that government sometimes has programs and they go on and on and on and on, and nobody ever evaluates how good they are. So the good programs don't get extra funding, and the bad programs keep going and get funding that could be used elsewhere. So I would love to have that information just so that we would know. And like I say, I'm not saying anything about them because I think especially we're finding with lots of things like pregnant mothers who were addicted and come in to deliver, if there is a peer person that has been through that available to help them see the problems, they often help them get treatment afterwards, and that's being a very effective way. So I'm just curious about how the effectiveness is. All right.
Absolutely, we can get that to you.
Thank you. Representative Dow?
Well, one policy-based thing that we can do that's relatively straightforward, that has to do with cessation is there is a bill that actually passed out of the House, HB 506, I believe, that has to do with making sure that Medicaid covers the cost of smoking cessation products. That's actually relatively inexpensive, and that's very well established in the literature in terms of helping people quit. So that's not like building a new program. It's just making sure that we can use
The
the modalities we already have that are established.
Okay. All right. Now, I skipped over Claudia Rodas? Pardon?
She's on Zoom.
Oh, you're on Zoom. Okay. Sorry.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes?
Yeah, well, good morning. Claudia Rodas. I am with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. Let me pull up my presentation here for a minute. If you give me a few seconds. And let me go to presentation mode here. Well, I want to thank you all for the opportunity, Madam Chair Cooper, for chairing this conversation around the impact of smoking and vaping, particularly in the state of Georgia. And thank you for all the members. I have enjoyed the dialogue that's going back and forth here on a number of different factors, particularly when it comes to e-cigarettes. As I mentioned, I am with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I am the Regional Advocacy Director for what we call the Southern region, which is most of the southern part of the nation. And I've been working on tobacco control policy for a little over 20 years. For those of you who, just real quick, not familiar with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, we're one of the leading national organization working both here in the US and internationally on tobacco control policies. And our mission is preventing kids from using tobacco products, helping smokers quit, and protecting everyone from secondhand smoke. Today's focus is around e-cigarettes, and I will try not to reiterate things that have already been said here. And I will have to say, I feel like this is such a well-informed committee here. So I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, and I'll maybe touch on a few things, but I will try to not repeat what's been said, and it's all been really great information. Just want to take a step back on a couple of different slides on how the tobacco companies have changed and evolved over the years. So if you look at the left side, well, on my left side, the before kind of, this is the slide, we knew that the companies, tobacco companies, were really cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, so it's sort of like that chewing stuff. And then we saw the evolving of e-cigarettes. Now, when we see and we talk about tobacco companies, it really runs the gamut, and they have really, their tentacles run differently. And so when we start talking about these products, a lot of it can become very muddled depending on who's having what conversation. But this is a quick slide, and the next slide as well, that talks about not only how the companies have reorganized, but because of that reorganization, the products that have come out from that reorganization. So when we saw the traditional combustible cigarettes or just your chewing tobacco, we are now seeing, as we talked about, e-cigarettes today, and the variety of products that are out there that's been touched on today, and just the differences of what these products look like. One thing I'd like to point out on the products itself is that they're always evolving. So it's important to remember that the landscape is changing the type of products. So we may be talking about, I know Jules been mentioned earlier today, but now, we have a variety of different other type of products that are actually more popular or just as popular. It's not only that product that's out there. So when these conversations are happening, particularly at the decision-making, your policy-making table, it's important to know how important definitions, keeping up with the different products, what kind of loopholes are being made. And our organization is always here to provide, those type of resources around what is the landscape we're seeing, how can you ensure that definitions that are being placed within your state are covering at least the most current products on the market. One product that I will point out here that sort of is the newest one that we're looking at are the heated tobacco products, so the IQOS. So we can do a whole presentation on the history and what those products are, but I think it's just a great example of, we talk about vapes, but we've got, heated tobacco products and synthetic nicotine products that are hitting the market now today that legislatures are coming back and looking at and saying, how are these products taxed? How are these products defined? How are they going to be enforced in our state? This is a quick slide about flavored e-cigarettes. So the prior speakers have touched on the amount of different flavors that are out there. We know that flavored tobacco products are really what are driving youth to use, particularly electronic cigarettes. So here's a slide showing even as recent as 2024, where it shows that 87.6% of e-cigarette users reported using a flavored e-cigarette. And among those, the most commonly used flavor types were fruit and candy flavors, followed by mint and menthol. I'm going to take us back a little bit. I know Representative Al talked a little bit about sort of when the new respiratory illness hit in 2020. And at that time, earlier in that year, February 2020, the FDA had prioritized enforcement against particularly cartridges-based e-cigarettes like Juul. The enforcement policy prohibited cartridges flavors except tobacco and menthol. But at that time, it allowed disposable products to continue to be sold in all flavors. So while several years ago, this policy continues to shape the market in which products are the most popular among youth, we continue to see these type of products that are in the market. So it limited the cartridges, but now we're seeing disposable e-cigarettes. We're seeing, as I mentioned, the menthol flavor cartridge-based products, the refillable devices. We touch on the e-liquids. So a variety of different type of products on how and the different components that make these products. This sort of loophole is what we call it at the federal level. While it addressed some, it opened the market to allow and continue other type of products to continue to be sold in the states. So on this slide, in February 2020, the policy led to increases in the sell and market share of menthol flavored e-cigarettes. So they limited a certain type of product, but what happened is it increased the sale of a different other type of products that were not exempt from that flavor restrictions of cartridge-based products. So from 2019, this started showing from 2019 to 2020. So sales of menthol flavored e-cigarettes more than tripled. And then fast forward to the latest data showing that as of December 2024, menthol flavored e-cigarette sales account for a little over 26% of the overall e-cigarette market and 61% of the pre-fill cartridge market. Menthol e-cigarettes remain popular among youth. And in 2024, 17% of high school e-cigarette users reported using a menthol flavored product. So research shows that today e-cigarettes, especially disposable e-cigarettes, contain, and it was mentioned earlier, massive doses of nicotine at even cheaper prices. So I know there was some discussion about why are these, why are youth gravitating or why are they using them more? We know that, and it was mentioned the nicotine levels are higher, products are cheaper. So what it does, it increases the appeal and addiction potential to young people. And some of today's e-cigarettes can contain as much or more nicotine as 20 packs of cigarettes. So here's a picture of the most popular e-cigarette brands among particularly high school users. And of the top selling brands among youth in 2024, Elf Bar, Escobar, Mr. Fogg, and Breeze are all disposable e-cigarettes. So again, lending to the fact that while they may have closed at the federal level, a particular type of e-cigarette, it still opened the door for other products to be sold. These popular youth brands are also among the top selling brands nationally. So one thing that I will point out that many of these products have not received FDA authorization. So they may either still be within a pending application or have some type of pending litigation. So I know there was some conversation earlier about, how do we enforce? How can we really look at and work together to really enforce these laws? And I'll talk a little bit about that in the policy solution part of my presentation. I wanted to quickly mention, this is again one of the newer products that we're seeing on the market. They're called smart vapes, and they're gaining popularity among youth. Both sales and brand preferences the data shows that both sales and brand preferences among young people reflect the growth in this new category of disposable e-cigarettes. So they tend to feature interactive screens. So the more you use them, the more you're able to interact with the product. So while the more recent NYTS brand data comes from early 2024, there was another national survey called the Tobacco Epidemic Evaluation Network, so the Teen Plus study. That was collected at the end of 2024, and it shows that emerging popularity of new smart vape products, particularly Geek Bar and Raz, that those were the most popular brand among youth, particularly around the ages of 12 to 17. So the evidence shows just how quickly youth brand preferences can shift based on changes in the marketplace. And both of these products, again, have not received FDA authorization to be sold on the market. So I know the prior presenter talked a little bit about e-cigarette marketing. I just wanted to show some examples and a little bit of different data to that. But the U.S. Federal Trade Commission recently began to collect data on marketing and promotional spending by the top e-cigarette companies. So those include Juul, Enjoy, the Ultra, Newmark, the Reynolds Vapor Company, and The marketing spending for these companies peaked at $1 billion in 2019. That coincides when we look at that peak of youth e-cigarette use. So a direct correlation that the more they were spending on marketing, the higher rates of youth e-cigarette usage we were seeing. So most recent data are from 2020 showing that 719.9 million, so almost 720 million spent on marketing and advertising in total. While spending has declined, social media marketing, which is, we know, generally cheaper than other forms of marketing, has been a big part of the marketing tactic that many of these e-cigarette companies use. Here are just a few slides to show what that looks like. So Big Tobacco has known for years that new products in youth were essential to keeping them in business. So they turned to what they called replacement smokers. That was their words, not our words. So influencers early on were used at promotional events. They were promoting their products, giving discounts, mentioned social media presence. So those were just a few tactics that the industry employed and continue to employ to sell their products. Here in the next couple of slides are just more pictures of what that e-cigarette marketing looks like on social media feeds. I am not in their category, so I can honestly say I don't see these directly, but we work with many youth and young adults that share these and have spoken to directly what these social marketing infographics look like. And here's some other ones that look at sort of that peer-to-peer marketing. So it's no longer just using influencers, but it's using the peers themselves, peer-to-peer youth who are using it, talking about using these products, really enticing their peers to take up usage of the products. So the tobacco industry knows what we know, and they know what works to reduce use. So here's some, I won't go through them all, but we consider this is their playbook. They used it back in the 60s and 70s when they were promoting cigarettes. We saw a reiteration of that, and we have seen a reiteration of how they market their products. They reform their image publicly and with policymakers, opinion leaders, and the public. They're using these words where they come and position themselves as harm reduction. For us, there is no reduction of harm. Harm is harm. And so we know it's harming, not only youth, but those who use these products. They have worked to gain a seat at the policymaking table, kind of saying, well, we have a solution. So I think everyone here can agree, and others agree, well, we have this problem. Where we differ is really on the policy solutions. Public health groups like ours really look at science-based policy solutions that we know have proven to make a public health impact. And we continue to fight to pass these effective policies to reduce smoking and other type of tobacco use. So here's a graphic showing the tobacco industry. This is national numbers. Last year they had spent, and we have been able, data has shows that they have spent $8.6 billion to market their products. This is all products. My previous slide really looked at just e-cigarettes. But we also know that while they're spending the money, it's also costing us as taxpayers to cover the health impact of tobacco use. So our data shows that it's costing taxpayers $241 billion in annual healthcare costs to treat tobacco-related diseases. And that doesn't include an additional $6.5 billion to treat illnesses due to secondhand smoke. Some of this data was shared, I know, at the previous hearing, but this is all data sourced out by the Federal Trade Commission. The tobacco industry continues to release new products and flavors. So I touched on that earlier. Again, they use the harm reduction arguments to oppose e-cigarettes and our smokeless tobacco policies. But then they also oppose policies that are proven to reduce cigarette smoking, such as I know they've talked about flavor bans earlier and cigarette or tobacco tax increases. Again, I talked a little bit about the smart vapes, but nicotine pouches is another new product that's hitting the market. I touched on the heated tobacco products. I've touched on the smart vapes. So those are the newest products that we are seeing on the market. And we are seeing legislation being proposed, whether it's through definition or a different taxation, whether it's a reduction or no taxation of these products at all. So we are seeing, different type of legislation being proposed that are trying to address these products. And for us, sometimes it's not as favorable as it could be to, again, make that public health impact. The tobacco landscape has changed. We talked about nicotine levels are higher than ever in these products. And because they're higher levels, the tobacco control policies must be strong and comprehensive to address these new products. So I want to touch real quick on a few slides on policy solutions. So great to hear from Representative Al that the next hearing will touch on those different type of policy solutions. Many of them have been talked about, I know, in previous hearings. I know some of the work and some of the conversations that have around the buffer zones and registry. I want to say that the three main ones, is those of us who work in tobacco control policy, the three big ones that are going to make the biggest public health impact are probably the toughest ones to pass. I know there's, I've heard around even this legislature trying to address these issues in a variety of different ways. But what we call the three-legged stool, like if you really want to make change and really make the biggest public health impact, is going to be tobacco taxes, smoke-free policies, and funding for comprehensive tobacco control programs. And I'm going to quickly touch on two of them because I know those have been the conversation, most of the conversation around taxes, and then obviously the funding impact that Georgia had this year with their program almost completely dissolving. I believe you all only have cessation, that's, a cessation program that's currently in place. So all the prevention programs, all the youth programs, all of that work that was being done pretty much has went away in the state of Georgia. I'm not going to go too much in depth around all this, but I wanted to mention some key things around tobacco taxes because I know there's been a lot of conversations around that. Won't go through these completely, but here's a checklist of what you want to look at when you're looking at tobacco taxes. We encourage comprehensive taxes if you really want to make public impact at the highest level. And I know that Georgia's one of them, but a number of states, and I'll touch on it a little bit on just looking at e-cigarette taxes. Those have been proven to make a very minimal public health impact. So you really want to look at the big comprehensive tobacco taxes. And this is just a number of things that you look at whenever you're looking at comprehensive taxes. A couple other things you want to consider as the conversations are having around taxes is the industry usually proposes lower tax rates on their products. And again, heated tobacco products, that's a big one that we saw in the last couple of years. They want to redefine themselves and lower their taxation, how they're taxed or not taxed at all. Some other non-taxing pricing models, you can look at minimum pack sizes, minimum prices, you can ban on discounts and coupon redemption. So those are, again, supplementary policies that can be done around taxation to, again, just really maximize the impact. When we talk about other tobacco products, we're talking about the moist snuff, we're talking about cigars, we're talking about roll your own, your variety of smokeless tobacco. So when we say cigarette taxes and OTPs are all the other tobacco products. For us, it also includes e-cigarettes when you talk about OTPs. And so we encourage that they are looked at comprehensively, again, to make the biggest public health impact. And looking at them so that there's a parity among those taxation. So here's a few guidelines when you're looking at taxing e-cigarettes. So remembering what products to cover, looking again at the tax method, where to collect the data, and looking at the tax rates. So those are some guidelines, and I'm sure you all cover that already within your current legislation. Just a couple more slides, so stick with me on taxation of emerging tobacco products. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention. There's no federal e-cig taxation, so states are looking at it on a state-by-state basis. They vary by jurisdiction, so they all look very different. Some of them use an ad valorem taxation, so a percentage of price. Others use a specific tax, like a per milliliter or cartridge. We recommend looking at the ad valorem taxation model. When you're going to look at e-cigarette tax, again, even looking at it in conjunction with the other tobacco products. And some states have a combination of both ad valorem and a percentage, or I'm sorry, a specific tax rate. So they'll do a combination. So again, looking at what the products to tax, what type to tax or impose are things that you want to look at, the tax rate, where to collect the tax, and also enforcement. It's really important to look at the enforcement part of this. We talk about the taxation, but we want to make sure that this is being enforced as is being implemented in the state. So last slide, we've mentioned it before, federal funding cuts did make an impact in many states, including Georgia, and the program that Georgia had around tobacco control and cessation. When you're looking at taxation and tobacco tax, we recommend that you dedicate a portion of that towards tobacco control programs. That would make a very big difference, particularly in a state like Georgia. I want to quickly mention before we, and I love the different policy solutions that are being proposed and will continue to be discussed. But when you look at, something like I just have to mention House Bill 577, sort of that registry directory bill itself. We have learned that that does take administrative cost to administer that. It is not a public health proven policy that we have seen. It's something new. It's more of a market share fight between the tobacco products. So as public health advocates, I do have to say that it's not a public health solution itself. It diverts funds. So when you're looking at Georgia, that's trying to hopefully rebuild your tobacco control program, we recommend that you do a taxation and put funding in tobacco control programs where we know that are proven to make a public health impact, rather than creating another system that we feel like has already been created through the FDA process. So with that, I will end and happy to answer any questions.
Fine. Okay, you're right. Okay. Representative Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need help with my memory. During the tobacco settlement years ago, there were changes in the rules and laws that had to do with marketing to youth. Do you know anything about how that has helped or hurt or made a difference at all? And would that be a model for us to use for saying that we don't need to have marketing and use those same guidelines that were used by that tobacco settlement on marketing tobacco products to kids? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That face doesn't look like it.
So you're asking about the MSA, the Master Settlement Agreement back in the late 90s, sort of thousands.
There were all kinds of cartoons that they were using and giving like candy cigarettes out that had the logos on it of big products. And it's my understanding that had to all go away, that they could not market to youth.
Right. So in 2009, Congress passed a law that restricted the sales of products, and it put a lot of those different type of restrictions and prohibitions. So yes, there were definitely some limitations in how the products were marketed. Particularly, you don't see them on TV. You don't hear these products being sold on the radio. You may see some in some targeted, adult magazines. So there were a lot of restrictions that were put in there, particularly for the products that existed in 2009. We started seeing e-cigarettes come on the market like in 2010, post all of that. Since then, Congress has gone back and said that e-cigarettes are considered tobacco products, and there's some restrictions that are put in there. So what tobacco companies did is they turned to what we call point of sale marketing. So when you talk about convenience stores and, you go in there and you see all those type of advertisements, they've turned to different type of models. So they said you couldn't do this. So they have turned to different type of models. So there are policies that some, mostly local jurisdictions that we have seen that do some advertisement restrictions, what can be seen, some buffer zone as well. Like if you're within a certain feet, you can't advertise, so there are some policies around there, but you are correct. After this master settlement agreement, there was that 2009 law that passed, put some restrictions, have to come back because there's all these new products that are being put on the market. But they're always trying to find a way to for some loopholes to continue to, and social media, right? Social media then ran the gamut, and that's really the primary way that we're seeing these products, particularly e-cigarettes, being marketed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time today, and it was informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dobie, and if you could not repeat, I think we've got it, that how they're marketing and everything. So can you tell us how? I think what I really want to know is you run a cessation program.
Yes.
At the Georgia Cancer Center. Succinctly, what do you do and what are the outcomes? Because we know what the problem is and how people are getting addictive and that it's growing. So if you can tell us how your program works and
Okay.
go.
So I'm Fonda Nash Dobie. I'm from the Georgia Cancer Center. I'm a tobacco cessation program coordinator, and I'm on the health sciences campus. Our program is 51%, have a 51% quit rate. How it works is you only come in for one appointment. The other appointments are going to be virtual or over the phone. So what we can say for 51% at a quit rate is that if you come through our program and complete the program, you have a 51% chance of quitting. We provide the patients with medications such as varenicline and also Wellbutrin, and they're also prescribed nicotine replacement therapy, and that's in conjunction with behavioral health therapy.
And that's it?
No, and it's evidence-based. No, it's a hard program. What we do is we also follow up with the patients for a full year. So we encourage them to a quit date, and we stick with it. Yeah, I also had a slide.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just amazed that a program has a 51% rate with that.
And we don't want to pay for it.
Huh?
And we don't want to pay for it.
I mean,
That was.
that's all right. Michelle's already been, taking it over here and it's so just
You got it on both sides?
I guess most direct. Okay.
So I've already did my introduction, and I thank you for having me here to talk about our cessation program and the importance of patients that are using tobacco to quit. It is a public health crisis, and as we know, that is a persistent use, and vaping often leads to nicotine addiction and dual use with cigarettes. 10% of high school students and 4.6% of middle school students in Georgia are reported current use of e-cigarettes. And what current use means is within 30 days, they've used tobacco products. And while traditional cigarettes are on the decline, flavored tobacco and vaping are currently rising. So tobacco use is directly linked to at least 12 types of cancers. So cigarettes smoking is the leading cause of preventable death worldwide. And also in Georgia, 1 in 4 deaths are directly related to tobacco use. Smoking causes numerous health problems such as strokes, COPD, lung cancers, and oral cancers, resulting in higher health costs. A healthier population leads to a more productive workforce. So we would be able to save funding there. In Georgia, $3 billion in healthcare costs are related to smoking. 10 billion per year is lost in productivity. More than 11,700 Georgians die annually from smoking-related diseases. Georgia is ranked 47th in prevention programs. We already talked about EVALI, but we'll go to the tobacco industry disproportionately impact on rural, marginalized, and lower income population. Georgia's cigarette tax has not changed since 2003. It's still at 37 cents a pack. And of course, you know, the national average is, I think, $1.52 on the taxes. So our cancer center is located in Augusta, Georgia. As I said, it's since 2005, we've seen 627 and supported since 627 patient referrals. We receive our referrals from outside of the organization as well as inside, but they're usually within the CSRA, which is the Savannah Central River area. We provide the participants with pharmacotherapy, which is nicotine replacement therapy, the gum, the lozenges, and the patches after we run it through their insurances. We also provide them with prescriptions like varenicline and bupropion. And also what research states is a conjunction with behavioral health support, that is how your cessation programs are impacted or effective.
You started the program when did you start the program?
I can tell you when I started. That program was started back in 21. And how many patients we've seen since then?
Right.
We've received thousands of referrals. We contact every patient is contacted. However, every referral that we get is contacted. However, some people don't want to quit.
Yeah.
Some people are all right where they are. So right now, I think we've seen close to, I want to say, at least 1,000 patients in our program, and they rotate in and out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yes, I was rewarded 2 grants from the Georgia Cancer Center. It was called the United in Fight grants, and these grants helped me to support our patients with varenicline, because at one time the insurance was not covering the generic of Chantix, and if you know, generic of Chantix could be up to $400. So with that, I wrote and received 1 grant in 24, 1 grant in 2025. And what it allows me to do is provide the patients with varenicline at no cost after we run it through their insurances. And like I think someone already mentioned, Medicaid already pays for nicotine replacement therapy, but not always pay for the varenicline. So I also partner with our pharmacy administrator for a 304B plan, which lowered the varenicline to $50, so that I'm able to impact more patients.
Who is running that plan?
It's who is running the grant? It's
plan, the pharmacy. Who runs that pharmacy?
the administrator there is Amber Jefford.
Oh, not the person. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Is it through the medical college, or?
I just know it's called a 304B plan, and I'm not for sure. It's a program for the pharmacy. I don't know how that is ran. When I spoke to her, this is what she was able to deliver to me.
No, I know how that works, but
Yes, ma'am.
Who owns the pharmacy?
Wellstar.
Okay, now through the college, since Wellstar is working with the college.
Exactly.
Okay, the reason I asked that, there's a big thing I'm glad to know it's working somewhere. One of the problems with that program is it has been misused.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to give patients medicines that are expensive at lower rates. Unfortunately, it has been used by whoever owns the pharmacy, whatever, to buy drugs at a lower cost through the feds. And then instead of charging $50 and reducing it, they charge them $300, and they're making money on it. So I'm glad to know that program at least, and you're getting it. They are doing what they're supposed to. They're getting it at a low cost, and they're giving it to the patient at a low cost. That's why I was asking.
Yes, exactly. Okay. I'm happy that the plan works as well. It works there. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Okay. So, for our youth and school outreach, we have what we call annually do a Fresh Air Fest, and then we educate students on the Augusta University campus, on the Somerville campus, on the dangers of vaping and tobacco products. So what we did was partner with the Student Life and Engagement, and we do what we call a summer kickoff. So along with having fun, we bring in other departments as well, such as, and I'll show you some of them on the next slide. We have also a new initiative Right now, it's called No Smoke, No Joke. We started that in July, the beginning of this year. And so far, we've reached 2 middle schools and 2 high schools in the Richmond County area. And it aims to inform middle school and high schoolers of the dangers of tobacco products and usage. We do a peer education and youth engagement. So we're doing a train the trainer model, which have the students act as advocates and have topics on flavored tobacco, peer pressure, lung health, and addiction. So this is some of our 2005 Fresh Air Fest. We have that's the respiratory therapy students. They bring in the pig lungs. So the pig lungs, they show you a healthy one and one that is impacted by tobacco. So it's like real life. You can see what happens to you when you're vaping and smoking. We also have bring in a few other departments like the AU nursing department, who provides education on HPV vax and everything. So we also have Dental College of Georgia, and we bring in the suicide prevention. And we give this so that our students can go off, not only have a safe summer, but also understand that hookahs are not water vapors, that vaping is just as bad as tobacco, and there's no safe alternative. And also to let them know, if they start, there is a place where they can come to us and quit. So we can use Augusta University as a health model. For example, there's 100% smoke-free, vape-free campus policy, the cessation resources for students, faculty, and staff. We have campus enforcement and peer support. We partner with our local government so that we make sure that they're adhere to the guidelines of the tobacco policy. And also we partner with nonprofits that ask us to come out and do tabling events. We provide NRTs and varenicline at no cost to the Georgia Cancer Center tobacco cessation patients. It's been effective, and I think it's a great program. And the only thing that we lack is funding. Right now, it's only 2 of us. So I, along with a patient educator, are running for a full hospital, the CSRA. So tobacco cessation not only is it's not only clinical, we're helping to generate a research driven for the real world interventions, advancing knowledge through research, examples like faculty-led studies on nicotine addiction, cessation effectiveness, and policy impact. We collaborate with behavioral health departments, our public health departments, and we receive most of our referrals from our low-dose CT department with Dr. Miller. We have dental colleges, and we also have the nursing departments. Data used to tailor interventions and strategies, and we do it as a public service to encourage. We do a public service, a PSA contest for our AU students. They put on a contest that do a tobacco commercial, and we use that for like a contest, and they love it. So it's pretty good. We got student-led innovations and projects in tobacco product reduction. What's next? The policy and prevention. We went through some of the policies already, but I'll try to touch on some of them really quickly. We're going to strengthen restrictions on flavored tobacco and vaping products, expand school-based education on the dangers of vaping and tobacco products, increase support for cessation programs, engage universities and cancer centers as public health partners, fund community-based cessation programs and navigator roles, support Medicaid coverage for evidence-based cessation programs, ensure that businesses are enforcing the Tobacco 21 law, provide free nicotine replacement therapies along with behavioral health to eligible Georgia residents for evidence-based programs. And also, let's talk about increasing the taxes for cigarettes. Let's work together. So the Georgia Cancer Center is committed to advancing equity, prevention, and education. We're ready to support the House Study Committee's work, and we're open to further collaboration, partnership, and research. The takeaway from this commit should be that there's no safe tobacco products. We're dying at alarming rates just for something that could be preventable. And here's my information. Do I have any questions?
Well, now that Wellstar they're running the medical college and they're running the hospitals, I suggest you hit them up and write a grant for the program, because I mean, I think they have a smoke-free campus,
Yes,
I think, for years. It's
Yeah.
been a big thing with them, and I think they have some grant programs, and
yes.
they should be willing to help you. Do that, because it sounds like it's working. And certainly with the colleges and all, good place maybe to start with our colleges and some of the programs that they have. So sounds like you might be onto a model of,
Cessation works. I want to just say, especially if it's evidence-based, if you're using the medication and being prescribed and follow-ups work, only thing I would suggest is we find a standardized way of getting results for quit rates. Like let's standardize it. Because I tried to see how other how other organizations work and do their results. For us, we do those that are solely complete our program, but other people are measuring it in different ways.
in different ways. You know, we've had that problem on a lot of things over the years.
Yes.
So
And
sounds like a good idea. So other questions? You got any questions? Great. Thank you very much. You came all the way from Augusta, so thank you
yes.
yes. So thank you. Sort of, I mean, it's interesting to see how it works. And so what it is, do you see them one time in sorry.
So they come in for one clinic
One time.
appointment. They're seen by a doctor or nurse practitioner, and this is where they do a full assessment. And after that, we see them virtually or over the phone. So there is no more traveling. We're trying to figure out how we can do it, the entire program telehealth, or at least add a telehealth component.
A component to it. Okay. And so the doctor, and they could order the medication there if they, or that y'all have it if they need it.
Exactly. So we send it to we always run it through their insurances
Okay.
first. And if not their insurance, we bring it to our medical college, well, the MOB, which is our medical office building pharmacy, and have it filled there at no cost.
It's sort of like, I mean, so what you're saying is you need the medication along with any kind of a behavioral.
Exactly. You have to, the varenicline is the first deterrent to tobacco cessation. So definitely if you can use varenicline, you should. However, for children 18 and below, you have to, there's no FDA approved cessation method. No FDA approved cessation medication or NRT.
Yeah, I think there's something coming for opiate addiction, a drug like that there's now sounds like that would really help people get off the opioids, that they could use that with the therapy or with methadone or whatever they're taking. I'm not sure if it's not FDA approved, I think it's coming. So, which shows that people need that extra help to really get them to stop.
So my background is behavioral health. So I know that even with any intervention medication, you should have a behavioral health approach.
Stuff like that.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Glad to hear how a program is working. Okay, Danny Thompson. Dana, I can't read. Sorry, Danny's after you, Dana, so I'm sorry. Thank you.
Throwing it off.
I just switched the first names around. That. Okay. All right.
Okay. Let's see here. Do I need to say, can I put in slideshow for next one?
And once again, if we've gone over it, if you could sort of skip over that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's not very long. My
Okay.
name is Dana Thompson. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the American Lung Association in Georgia. This is also very personal for me. I have two high schoolers at home and a middle schooler. And the peer pressure is real. These vapes are very prevalent. So thank you for having me today. I think we have kind of covered, what's
No,
in an
that's, I
e-cig.
asked you if your kids have tried the vape.
I have found vapes in their cars and confiscated them. And I will also say that they have been solicited on Snapchat by older kids trying to sell them vapes.
Ah,
They put it in the mailbox. They're offering to put it in the mailbox and they leave cash. So both of my teens have been solicited by older kids in that way. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Peer pressure is great.
right. Yeah. Electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, they include e-pens, e-pipes, hookah, e-cigars. Want to highlight that they go under a lot of names. There's a lot of names for these things. We have studied cigarettes for a very long time, and other tobacco products. We know that, that lung health and the effects that they pose to lung health and overall well-being. E-cigarettes being relatively new leaves much to be determined about the lasting health consequences of these products, however. We are very troubled by what we see so far. A recent study from North Carolina found that even in small doses, e-cigarette users are exposed to a high level of toxins. The inhalation of harmful chemicals can cause irreversible lung damage, as we've heard here today. Almost all e-cigarettes include nicotine, even the ones that say they do not, as well as chemicals and toxins that are unsafe to inhale. Studies have proven that even as advertised zero nicotine, they do have nicotine in them. I won't go over, this list of toxins. I think we've covered it, but want to point out that more than 4,000 kids under the age of 18 have tried their first nicotine vape each day. So it's not only the user taking in these harmful chemicals. E-cigarette emissions contain nicotine, ultrafine particles, and toxins that are known to cause cancer. These include these volatile organic compounds that we've discussed here today, but it's really important to highlight that, I think we've all experienced walking, behind somebody out of the airport, or, I've experienced at the grocery store, somebody blows a big puff in my face, and it's very frustrating. Multiple scientific reports have made it clear that using e-cigarettes causes health risks, increases the chance that children and youth will start to use combustible products, and exposes others to dangerous secondhand e-cigarette emissions. I want to emphasize that no e-cigarette has been found safe and effective by the FDA to help people who smoke quit their nicotine addiction. Unfortunately, what is more likely to happen is smokers will use both e-cigarettes and cigarettes, often referred to as dual use or completely switching to cigarettes, which only changes how a person gets their nicotine. An equivalent might be using smokeless tobacco instead of cigarettes. In addition, a disturbingly high number of young adults aged 18 to 24 years old who use e-cigarettes did not smoke previously. That's why the Lung Association recommends that both adults and teens end their dependence on nicotine once and for all. We do have evidence-based programs such as Freedom from Smoking and Not on Tobacco that can help any adult or teen quit. Switching to e-cigarettes does not mean quitting. Quitting means ending your addiction to nicotine, which can be difficult. The American Lung Association has decades of experience in successfully helping smokers quit using proven ways that are both safe and effective. We recommend a multi-component approach and a comprehensive public health approach that addresses youth vaping, tobacco, and nicotine. And we have specific strategies in place. Treatment for smoking cessation is not a one-size-fits-all, as we've kind of just heard from the last speaker. Just like any other medical condition, everyone responds to treatment differently. It is normal for patients to try more than one treatment before finding the right one. For this reason, it's important that cessation benefits offered to smokers are comprehensive. We talked a little bit about these barriers at the last session and just wanted to highlight them here. Adult e-cigarette use in Georgia is 7.6%, which is above the national average of 6.5%. There's been a steady increased use amongst adults that's been documented over the last few years. It's risen nationally from 3.7% in 2020 to 4.5% in 2021, and we see this national rate at 6.5%. Notably, e-cigarette use is higher among adults who have less education or lower incomes or who do not have health insurance. There are several strategies that tobacco and e-cigarette companies are using currently to protect their profits at the expense of public health. One example is the redesigning of product strategy and is the push of more nicotine in the e-cigarettes. The majority of e-cigarette sales now go to high-strength nicotine e-cigarettes, whereas the opposite was true several years ago. This makes it significantly harder to quit. You can usually tell how effective a particular policy will be at reducing tobacco use by whether the tobacco companies file a lawsuit over it. These companies have been particularly aggressive about filing lawsuits against restrictions on the sale of flavored tobacco products lately. However, they have not won a lawsuit about state authority to pass these restrictions to date, or local. I mentioned at the last hearing our annual state of tobacco control report. This report provides a blueprint for states to follow in order to eliminate the nation's leading cause of preventable death, tobacco use. I want to emphasize again that Georgia has received nearly all F grades in all 7 categories, and is one of the 4 states that we've highlighted, along with Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas, with the most need to enact policies to reduce the burden of tobacco use. This is a chart comparing several aspects of Georgia and the border states on other tobacco products that was mentioned earlier. The American Lung Association strongly supports equalizing tobacco taxes across all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. It creates a level playing field and discourages people, and especially youth, from initiation and encourages people to quit instead of switching between cigarettes and other tobacco products. We also recommend that tobacco products not be taxed by weight to allow the tax to keep up with inflation and industry price increases. There are 6 states that are not captured here that have taxes on these OTP products that include e-cigarettes that are equivalent to the cigarette tax as of January 2024. I know we don't like to compare ourselves to California. That's one of the states, Colorado, Maine, Utah, Vermont, and Wyoming.
Can you repeat that?
Those 6 states, they have an equalized tax rate with e-cigarettes and their cigarette tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whatever they charge on cigarettes, they charge across the board.
Yes, it's equalized. Well, it's equalized, yeah.
Only,
6 as of 2024.
okay.
So I just wanted to touch on tobacco retail licensing because the fees are so low. It's a policy tool that enables state and local governments to regulate businesses that sell products, including e-cigarettes, to ensure they comply with tobacco control laws. Currently, Georgia only charges $10 annually for tobacco product retailers and $20 for vape retailers. Renewal fees are also nominal for manufacturers at just $10. Tobacco retailers must be licensed at a rate that covers those underage persons and enact strict graduated financial penalties and loss of license. Enforcement of these laws must be diligently pursued and should include using underage person compliance checks. There is no minimum number of compliance checks currently, and I pulled a percentage from another presentation that 75% of kids who buy tobacco products are not refused even though underage. And I think that number comes from the Heart Association. The American Lung Association strongly supports funding state tobacco prevention and quit programs at levels recommended by the Centers for Disease Control. These programs provide services to help people quit tobacco, provide education, prevent young people from starting, and increase knowledge of the dangers of tobacco use and secondhand smoke exposure. Sustained investment in these vital public health programs over the long term will prevent thousands of related illnesses and deaths and save billions of dollars in medical expenses. One study concluded that if states spent just the minimum amount recommended by the CDC, youth smoking rates would be 3 to 14% lower across the nation. I think we've mentioned today that funding has been cut in Georgia, and we are hoping to look to our state budget to make up for that. And that concludes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I noticed you sort of whispered that you wanted Georgia to pick up the tab.
Oh, no, I gave y'all a letter last time. No, we're trying to yell it from the rooftop. We want to make up that funding, on the state level. We're really hoping.
I mean, I'm sure that we're not the only state that it doesn't know what's going to happen, and that we'll certainly be looking at all the programs that have changed so drastically. But I mean, it could be major changes in a lot of areas, or they see to change their mind up there sometimes too. So in the big DC area. So
It is evolving quickly. I just wanted to quickly highlight that HB 577. So those are registry bills that are, big tobacco is behind those bills. We know that. We've seen them across the Southeast and across the country. It's more about market share than public health. And they're kind of selling them to legislatures under the guise of a public health solution. So we did not support that bill. Just wanted to emphasize that.
Okay. All right. So I'll talk to Houston about it since it's already over and I'm sure
Yes.
y'all are over working against it on the Senate side
Sure are.
and
Yeah.
trying to explain it to them.
Mhm.
Okay. I think Representative Dowd brought that up, and so I'm sure they're on it. If you have questions or
I do. Do you, or can you, I guess we can find this out too. Do you have any idea what the retail licenses are in other states? Since
I certainly could get an evaluation. I think the threshold is just too low, but we certainly could pull those numbers pretty quickly for you. And I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. I think we've had a lot of good information from everybody, but if you have specifics, you represent a group, things you would like to see us change, when you hit us with 12, we're probably not going to hit 12. If you, besides more funding, and you could count that as it's just given and write up that more funding, what 3 changes in the law you think would make the biggest difference and realistically that we can accomplish on the state level? I think that would be helpful, and you give them to Andrew so that not just your testimony here helps, but going forth. And I'm real interested in your peer education and peer group, working with peers and training peers.
Yes, training middle schoolers and high schoolers, that one.
Yes, well, and then just the program in general is really, it's like, I think that often government just needs to get out of the way on things and facilitate things after they come up from a natural. And I think this is obviously what's happened. You found through your background how to change things, and you started something that seems to be working, and it's bringing in the medical school, or at least the medical component as well as the behavioral component. And anything you'd like to suggestions for how we might work with our other university systems would be really interesting on how you got started in my event. And I'll, be glad to talk to you, not after today, but I'll talk to you when I talk to you about phone. I have a plane to catch, and I didn't mean to just push you out. So like that. And it's not for pleasure, I can tell you. I lost a sister back in February, and I have the first experience of being an executor, and her home is sold, and I have to go to Texas now to clean it out. And so I've had many jobs in my life, and this is one of the worst ones. So anyway, so it's not for pleasure that it was in, and the time caught up on me. So I do apologize to everybody. But if there are things that you really want to push, if you would give them to Andrew, we still have another time to go. So there's still time to do that. And thank you for your presentation. And as you can see, people do disagree on the value of bills, and advocacy is so important. I can't tell you, because Michelle and I talk a lot, and I talk to Debbie, but if we weren't particularly talking about that, to look at that bill like that, it would never occur to me to look at it that way. I would have been one of the ones that thought, and I'm sure I voted for it, that it was mainly to decrease smoking. So advocacy is so important, first with your own state representative and senator, but then like on health, Representative Hawkins and I chair the health committees. And so I'll talk to anybody in the state about about a program or something that you don't like about a bill. Sometimes I might agree with you, sometimes I won't, but if we don't hear from people who really work out, people bring us bills to change, but if we don't work in those areas, then we're not the experts on everything. And law, we get a whole lot of bills to look at on all sorts of issues. So we really rely on the advocates. So thank you. And thank you, Dana. Okay, last but not least, Danny Queso? Hey, Queso. Short and sweet.
Absolutely. Well, I know that we've now transitioned to the afternoon portion of this meeting.
Yeah,
I will
right.
keep it brief so that we can all get on.
Well, to the money part.
Absolutely. So my presentation really is brief, but thank you,
Okay, thank
Madam
you.
Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for all being here, for your dedication to this issue. But my name is Danny Canso. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, where I am senior fiscal analyst, and going to give you a little bit of a landscape of what the usage and taxation of vaping looks like now in Georgia, in our neighbor states, and nationally, and kind of what some of the leading research has found on this. So basically, for the last fiscal year that just ended, we sold approximately 47 million milliliters of vaping product in the state of Georgia. So that's equivalent to about $151 million of retail sales. So in cigarettes, to give you context, it's about 350 million packs. So vaping is still below that, but growing every year, and certainly kind of one of those leading drivers in the market. So of that, we collected less than $13 million. So very little, and what you'll see is of states with vaping tax policies, Georgia's at the very bottom in terms of what we're assessing right now. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, how we kind of set up the equivalent between, how do you compare cigarettes and vaping products in terms of damage and usage and all of those things. But if you look at sort of all of the metrics of that, you get between 1 and 4 milliliters of vaping is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. And so the average is around 2 milliliters of vapor product. So what that means basically is to get that equivalent in pricing, your average consumer is spending about $5.40 for that 2 milliliter vaping product. An average pack of cigarettes, on the other hand, is about $9.50. And part of the reason is because there are big tax gaps. So there's no federal tobacco tax. So that is $1.01 that's on every pack of cigarettes. So we subtract that down from the $9.50. Then you subtract down the state tax, 37 cents, and you get closer to $8.10 is kind of the product price before taxes. So in Georgia, it's about $5, the comparison for a vapor product. So when we talk about kind of these pricing consequences, this is sort of the most accessible and the cheapest product to do sort of the most damage, so to speak. And so right now we have 2 tiers. We have the closed system tier, kind of your disposable vapor product, things like that. It's 5 cents per milliliter, and then all other products are 7% of the wholesale price. So when we look at kind of how that compares to other states, and you can see kind of some of what I was saying there are 17 states that don't have any policy on vaping. So we subtract those. So there are 33 states that do. Georgia is one of those right now, plus Washington, D.C. So among those 33 states, we are at the very bottom. So we have the lowest tax per milliliter. 5 cents is tied for the lowest. And we also have the lowest percentage tax. 7 cents also puts us in that category. So of states with tax policies, we are at the very bottom. If we were to look at the national average of those 33 states plus DC, it would be 82 cents per milliliter. So it would be, 15 times more than where we are right now. If we were to look at kind of the median of those, so another middle point, it would be 50 cents. So that's 10 times where we are right now. But I will say when we look at the states that are sort of drawing the most revenue out of these products, they are all taxing at a wholesale rate. So 12 states in the country tax over $1 per milliliter, and all of those are percentages. And the largest is Minnesota at 95%, and again, Georgia's the lowest at 7%. So that's kind of the range that we see. So if you are thinking about something, I mean, I really would encourage y'all to think about percentages and think about kind of applying all of these things consistently. And then in the South, you can see it ranges from North Carolina, that's tied with us, that has the per milliliter tax, up to Louisiana, that's at 15 cents. So all those states generally among the lowest. But sort of the current state projection is for vaping and sales of vapor products to increase by about 2% a year. But just what we see in the data is, again, just increasing prevalence among the youth, and that these are the products they're picking up in the greatest frequency. So those projections are really conservative, and sort of what we've seen is the state has already outpaced those projections generally so far. So we are, kind of growing rapidly, whereas cigarettes are decreasing at a little over 3% per year. So this is definitely something to consider proactively. And then you've heard a lot of these ideas so far, so I won't kind of belabor it, but when we look at ways to mitigate this and ways to reduce usage, reduce uptick, kind of your categories would be age restrictions, flavor restrictions, sales licenses, which you heard a little about, which is, I think, a really good idea and an important idea. State regulations, you heard a little bit about that, and local regulations, warning labels, location use restrictions, and tax policies. So these are kind of all of the buckets. But when we look at the studies and we look at kind of the data, really the most effective have been permit and retail location regulations, flavor bans, and taxation policies. Those are the three areas that just consistently, when we look at studies, have the most positive findings and sort of the most data showing that we can reduce uptick and we can discourage usage with those three ideas. And so, interestingly, when we increase taxes, in particular, it doesn't, just the research so far, the best studies we have shows that it doesn't lead people to other products. So they looked at particular marijuana and other tobacco products. Many of these states also have different marijuana policies than Georgia, so there was thought to be kind of a pathway there, but not really. And part of the reason is because the barrier, the cost of entry, is so low right now that is really a marketable that's very accessible to young people in particular. So if we make it look more like cigarettes, where your average product goes from costing around $5.50 to closer to $10, that really does make a big difference in terms of when people start. And that's really kind of the most meaningful intervention point as we look at how do we avoid this becoming something like cigarettes, going from 141 million liters a year, which is still a lot. It's doing a lot of damage, up to cigarettes, which is much greater but declining, and where you could easily imagine if the state weren't going to act, we could easily find ourselves on that trajectory. So just lastly, as we end, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today, I would really encourage you, as you're considering this effort, these hearings have been really great. It's been wonderful to hear this discussion, but to continue on this thread and to keep it comprehensive. And to look at these products together, because it really is something where you take a policy in one direction and it could swing things pretty significantly, particularly something like this where we have a market that's growing and emerging really quickly. So with that, I'll pause for any questions.
Thank you very much for that. I was sitting here and I asked representing out if the vaping liquid came from actual tobacco production. And she said, not all of it, because nicotine is something you could make, isn't it? It's a synthetic issue. And I think one of the reasons that we've had such resistance to increasing the tobacco tax is that it is still a crop here in Georgia, although not one of our top crops, but one that I understand today from somebody tell me up to maybe that it's a cash crop where you might not make money on corn, but if you grow tobacco, then that will bring you cash, which is very important to farmers that grow other things. But it seems like to me, if this is a synthetic, it's almost a health issue with a synthetic product that is harming our young people and all. I don't know they can make it any different how we go about trying to do something about it, but to me, that we're using a chemical to, an addiction, and it's doing severe harm to young people. And
Yeah, I think that's right, that argument that it hurts agriculture is a less potent argument for vapes in specific, right? And I think likely the tobacco companies understand that, right? And how they market it, and they're moving towards this argument. Again, that sounds good to people about it being a harm reduction product and a cessation aid and
Yeah.
all these types of things. But yes, I think that's a good point, and that's why we're seeing so much of this push now of pretending that it's this healthier alternative to
So-
incinerated tobacco.
Well, just one quick comment on that. But I mean, the way that state law is set up right now is really to incentivize people to look at these products over cigarettes, over other tobacco products. So I mean, right now, our taxes is very, very low. I mean, if you average it, it's about 4% of the actual retail product cost. So we're telling folks that just by the policy of the state right now that this is something that we want to encourage.
Right.
So if we were to think about parity, something like that, that would be really at least 50 cents per milliliter, around 20% is versus 4% is where we are right now. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate everybody that presented today. I certainly picked up some important points, and I have been so against smoking because I grew up with a stepmother a mother first that smoked, but not as bad as my stepmother. And it just totally, I've never tried to smoke at all. And I try to be not around those people. So I think that even though from a health perspective and being a nurse, I knew what the effects of it were, but the more and more you hear about it, especially this vaping with our children. And for a while, we had a huge number of mothers coming to us when people started getting the popcorn. And then it just sort of went away and we are not hearing about it. So I think it's really good. Thank you, Representative Al, for bringing and asking for a study committee. And I think it'll maybe give us some new ideas about maybe approaches and maybe another way of looking at this as we go forward, trying to do something about it.
Just to close things out, we do have one more convening of this study committee,
Right.
which is going to focus on policy recommendations resulting from what we've heard in the first two. And just to set people's minds on what we maybe want to be thinking about in a more organized way and suggesting a concrete policy that we can try to pass in the state of Georgia. The 5 things that I flagged to think about how we want to talk about it in concrete terms. 1, permitting and retail restrictions, as Mr. Canso noted, for vaping products in specific. 2, talking about flavor restrictions in specific, because I heard from Ms. Thompson with American Lung that the tobacco companies have been less successful in terms of litigating these restrictions on the state level. So that may be an avenue that we can do that federally has been less successful. 3, tax policy. We've talked about that ad nauseum, I think. 4, talking about environmental exposures and including vaping exposure as part of clean air ordinances locally and statewide. And 5, talking about funding for cessation and education programs within the state, especially in the face of reduced federal funding. Does that pretty much encapsulate what we
I think
touched
so.
on today?
And
Okay.
certainly, look to if anybody else brings up something. I mean, I think especially on the flavors, when the Congress got around to passing their restrictions, the one thing they didn't restrict menthol. And I think that this is one of the worst things they ever did. They didn't restrict it because menthol is the favorite flavor and the one used by African Americans. And so therefore, that's one of the reasons, and it was talked about at the time, that they didn't restrict the sale of the menthol cigarettes and vaping materials, which I think is terrible to pick out something just because it's the favorite things of people if you're trying to protect people and actually getting them to smoke. And that was a known fact when and talked about when Congress passed that law. So I really would like to see that go. And the flavors, the vaping flavors have always been the ones that the kids wanted. I mean,
And I
you
would
know,
like,
cotton candy, who might not be encouraged to have something that's cotton candy tasting, you know, instead of the nasty nicotine taste, I think people say there is. So anyway, well, thank you for coming and staying with us this long.
Chairman.
Oh, Chairman Hawkins, you got a word?
yeah, I'm sorry. Like I said, I don't have the hand raised thing on this computer.
Okay. I'm
I
glad-
would like to include in there that the ingredients of these vaping products must be disclosed, because they're putting all kinds of things in these vaping products, and I think the public and the user should know.
And you mean how far it goes when you smoke, how far the radius, how far this.
No, the ingredients of the vaping product,
Liquid.
the chemicals added, the chemicals that's in that product. I think it's very important because they're adding other things for taste that could be, or nicotine and the amounts of nicotine. I think all that should be disclosed on each product by the manufacturer
I
to be
certainly.
sold in this state. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't like that.
Huh? They won't like that. Well, they won't like,
I
they
don't
won't.
care.
And are there any, as a dentist, is there any other, and if there is, you can let us know specific problems that the vaping causes your gums or anything that any different than what cigarette use does or anything?
Yeah, I can check into that. Be happy to.
Like the
Good idea.
restriction.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much, everybody. And you're welcome to come back to the next session, and hope you have the rest of the summer. That's good days, and hopefully maybe some of them won't be quite so hot. Thank you. We're dismissed. Let me